Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us for this session titled Turning Family Influence into a Pathway for Student Success. As college counselors and university representatives, we all know that behind every university-bound student stands a family, often a deeply invested one, sometimes quite anxious, and occasionally conflicted one. Whether it's offering unwavering support, adding pressure, or shaping key decisions, families play a pivotal role in the admissions journey. Today, we are going to explore how schools and universities can work together to navigate parental expectations and turn their involvement into a constructive force for students' well-being and success. I'm thrilled to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers, very experienced professionals who work with families from diverse cultural and educational landscapes across the Americas. So we've got Kemal Taskin, a college counselor at Uruguayan American School in Uruguay. Elizabeth Michelle Ray, a college counselor at School of the Nations in Brazil, and Ilse Gleason, the Future Pathways Advisor at ITJ Palomar in Mexico. Warm welcome for them. Unfortunately, we have lost our university representative. He had an emergency and couldn't join last minute. So this is the time to say if there is a university representative who is not shy and who is watching the global session right now, just give me a sign, raise your hand, and I can give you access so that you can join the global session and you can join the dialogue together with the counselors. Don't be shy. Otherwise, we're going to hear just one side of the story. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, good morning,
Thank
everybody.
you for not being shy and joining us. Can you just quickly present yourself for the rest of the attendees?
Yeah, my name is Andrew. I'm from BIM University, and I'll be happy to explain about this family influence when talking about arts universities studying in the UK.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we can start straight with the questions. I have divided my questions, part of them to be to counselors and part of them to be university representatives. So I'm just going to name you when to jump in. But of course, if anybody wants to add something to what somebody else is saying, just pitch in.
Sure.
It's pretty much a free conversation. So first, I just want to talk with the counselors a little bit about how they engage parents effectively into their work. A question to the counselors: what have been your most successful tactics so far for engaging parents in the university application process? Let's start alphabetically with Ilse.
Hi. Well, yeah, in my case, definitely include them way before 11th grade, like even kindergarten. So yes, in my case, it's like just include them really, really early on. Of course, in kindergarten, you talk about other stuff, definitely, but it works. And also inviting them for things that are not necessarily the same thing always. Like try to include them in some speakers, series, or just give them even a prize for reading the newsletter. So in my case, it's just like have different tools to motivate them to come and talk to them.
Okay, and Michelle, what are your tactics?
I agree. I think building relationships with the parents early on helps a lot. I have a unique situation where I moved to high school after teaching elementary and middle school. So I've been with the kids for a really long time, and I noticed a big difference in my relationship with the families because of that. And I also think inviting them to as many events as possible is really helpful because the more they engage with the universities or maybe presentations that you're doing, any kind of workshops, it gets them more involved. And I believe that they really like to be involved and that they like to know what's happening. Something else I think is really important is to leverage the host language. So at my school, most of my families are Brazilian. So usually once or twice a year, I'll do a presentation with Portuguese translation happening. And I also, if we have a rep that speaks Portuguese, I'll have them do a special session with the parents or Education USA as well. And so leveraging the language of the school, I think is really nice as well.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to this topic of the international applications in a bit with Andrew, but let's first hear it from Kemal.
Yes, yes. I'll piggyback on what Michelle said with the language because I mean I speak Spanish pretty well, but I realized just in the last couple months a lower parent turnout for some uni reps coming, and so we had several recent reps come from Spain, even though the programs may be offered in English at those universities. I had the reps speak in Spanish, and I advertised those sessions, which parents are always welcome to attend, that the rep will be speaking in Spanish. And that did have a positive effect. More parents started showing up. And of course, all our kids are bilingual, so that was not an issue. I was sitting next to one parent at one of the sessions, and I could tell that, there was this Latino different connection with when the rep was speaking Spanish and the kids and the parent were listening to it. So that was a good reminder for me of the power of language. Another tactic that I've used recently to increase turnout is to go use the parent support group. Of course, there's now WhatsApp chat groups for everything, but I realized that our traditional advertising of weekly parent communication and newsletters and stuff doesn't work as well as parent grade level WhatsApp chat groups, and so I'm using that as a communication out to parents about what I do. Finally, I am in a small school, so when I give presentations, as Ilse said, I invite everybody. I don't care whether they're at the middle school level or older. Their kids are older. I think getting everyone into to a parent presentation, just gets the word gets out of my qualifications and what our office does here. So that's always also been a success here at our school.
Thank you, Kemal. And now a question is to Andrew. Andrew, your university accepts students from around the world. So, how is how can universities better support schools by providing more accessible, culturally sensitive, multilingual resources for parents who are navigating international applications?
My school recently created a whole international team, and we put reps strategically placed around the globe. I recruit and represent North America, including Canada, the US, Mexico, and some Caribbean nations. And we also have team members in multiple locations in China and Hong Kong. We have team members in India and Pakistan. We have team members dotted around Europe. And what that allows us to do is not only target specifically through language, which is something that we've been talking about already, but it allows us to target through time zone, which is something that can be really important. Our school is based in the UK, and right now that means when I'm on the west coast of the US, I'm 8 hours behind the time zone of my colleagues at the university. And that means that the students who are out here have almost no way of communicating with people who work at that school if they're based at that school. So aside from some of the more obvious accessibility issues and engagement issues of language, I think we also need the accessibility of people being close to home. That doesn't mean that they need to necessarily be in country, but being as close as possible, being reachable in multiple time zones that are friendlier to those students and parents has really seen positive turnarounds for us at BIM.
Thank you. And now I want to go to another question about the parents and ask the counselors, what are the problems you face with the parents the most? Ilse?
I guess in my case, it's just they're not so informed about certain careers, most of all the new ones, and they're like a little bit afraid of their kids experimenting with new careers. So in my case, what I do is just like, first of all, inform them. Like if one of my students wants to study, I don't know, arts, and the parents are not okay with it, I want to listen why. Like the reason is for me important, and then I see if I can help them a little bit, maybe contact them with experts of the industry, alumni, or just the universities, and see if that helps. if it doesn't help and the parents are still like, it's not going to happen, you're not going to study that, then I have two paths. Either finding middle ground, which is okay, you want to study arts and your parents want you to study engineering, then maybe we can find something in the middle. Maybe let's go for architecture and take other classes that are related to art, and then just you know or okay, can you pay for it? It's like a very honest question. It's like, are your parents going to pay for the university, or is there a way that if you can, I don't know, get a scholarship, you can pay for it? If they say yes, then it's like having that awkward conversation with the parents, or saying, okay, if you're not going to pay for it and your parents have to pay for it, then definitely they're going to decide. So what you can do is just like study that for now. Don't feel like it's going to be like that all your life, and then try to study something else.
It's the money factor is always an issue, isn't it, with the parents, and it's a big card the parents can obviously play. Maybe here, just before the rest of the counselors, I can share something from my experience. I had a parent who, in May of 12th grade, after a student told his daughter that he's only going to pay for her education if she is going to an Ivy school to study nuclear physics, and that's in May of 12th grade. And because she was Jewish on her mom's side, she actually joined the Israeli military for 2 years. That's an obligation, and she wanted to do it because they get paid, and then the military helps them get into university of their choice. So that was her way out of, her parents' involvement in her life. She wanted to do it so that she wanted to study psychiatry, and that's what she's doing right now, but she had to join the military for this. That's a short story from me. Michelle, how about you? How do you manage? What are the most problems you face with parents, and how you manage them?
I believe the biggest issue are misconceptions about studying abroad. First off, with scholarships, a lot of them don't understand, how much of a scholarship they can get, that certain schools might only give financial need. What does that mean versus merit? And so I've been really trying to change the mindset at the school. Instead of coming to me and saying, I need a scholarship, talking more about how much you can afford, how much can you pay for, because that drives the conversation a lot. If you should apply to the US or Canada or Europe or stay in Brazil. And so I've been talking to them a lot about that. Also, the rankings, they're very big into the rankings, and they look a lot at, the Ivy Leagues and the top 100 and those things, and they don't understand that maybe the university is even highly ranked, but if it's a name that they don't know, they just assume like it's not a quality education. So just educating them on what best fit means has been, crucial in my role. And also I would say careers as well, because in Brazil, a lot of students go into very traditional careers. So trying to teach them what other options are there out there. So if you want to study business, there's so many different fields to go into. And so having those conversations.
Thank you, Michelle. And Kemal, your 2 cents on this topic.
Sure. No major problems here. I think for me, I was in Singapore before I came here, so I was there for 5 years. I was in a larger school, and things in Singapore and other countries happen very fast. Everyone, the parents there were very involved, and a lot of parents showed up. They showed up on time. There was a lot more pressure on me to deliver. I was always, very detail minded. And things are much more relaxed here in Uruguay anyway. And maybe that's, I'm not going to make sweeping generalizations, but it is relaxed here. And I really have to respect that. I have to understand and not get too worked up if there's not a large presence at a presentation. So what I do is I just keep, as I said earlier, I just keep emailing out parents, and I keep trying many ways to engage parents, as many as I can. And I really don't care whether it might be too much, but everything from the interest inventory. We work with a tool here called Morrisby, and I send the reports to all the parents. I let them know that I'm available, at any time to meet one-on-one. At a recent at parent-teacher conferences, which sometimes we're not really involved in because we don't have short conferences. The parents don't have short conferences with us like they do with the teachers. I said, I'm here. I'm in my office. I want to meet with you. I emailed every parent of the grade 11 class to do that. So just, I guess my point is, continuing to be proactive and show initiative with parents. I think that sets that culture for my office anyway.
Thank you, Kamal. And in a bit, I'm going to go to this relaxed part, which is also interesting for me. But before that, a question for Andrew. Andrew, how do you deal with parental involvement at university level? I know that it can continue. Parents that are a bit helicopter and are trying to contact the university all the time. Do you have experience with this, with such cases?
Yes, I think the way that I often look at it is that parents don't know what they don't know. And so even as the university rep, it's part of our job to educate them on how the process is different. For a lot of them, they haven't applied to college in 18 to 20 years. And so the process that they went through is significantly different than what their student is going through now. So not only are we educating them on P&P process, policies and procedures, we are also educating them, much like that my colleagues on the other side are, about what options there are for the student post-graduation. We have to sort of look 3, 4 years down the road for us to talk about career capabilities for these majors. But we also talk a little bit about how university is continuing education, not necessarily career planning. Even for us as an arts-based university, we do have students who graduate and go into what we would consider more traditional career paths, but their background in filmmaking or songwriting, their creative development major allows them to get hired in a more traditional setting with a different set of skills. We're especially finding that in North America, people with arts majors are coming out and being hired in a lot more industries, marketing, advertising, human resources, quality assurance, and things like that because of their creative backgrounds, their multi-point problem-solving skills. And so it's not necessarily that the parents are coming in with a blockade of questions or issues where they are pushing back about arts education. It's that they are concerned that it won't provide their students with the skills that they need. And I think that's because they don't know what arts education really means. They think that that means they're just going to take dance classes all day. And yes, dance majors take dance class all day, but they also learn how to do creative analysis and literature analysis, and they learn how to review critical and creative works. They write extensively, and that's true of film, dance, theater, music. That critical analysis component, that skill building component is hugely important. So parental education is what we have to do, helping them realize that it's different than what it was 18 to 20 years ago, and recognize also there are two big hurdles for parents. And like what we were saying, when students have their parents talk about the Ivy League to the top 100s, two things that parents don't know: those lists are self-reported, which is why Columbia and Brown have been temporarily banned because of misinformation. And that's nobody's fault. That's accidents that happen. And also the fact that those lists are creating what we call the neighborhood test. You can go down your driveway or go to a neighborhood event and tell your neighbor about a school that your kid is getting into, let's say Duke. And your neighbor can be really excited because they know the name Duke. But if you were to go into the arts world or any other world and you mention the name Duke, that might not be that impressive because that university is not strong in a certain area. So we call that the network test, right? If you were to go into a music theater program, Duke would not be a top 100 school for musical theater. And that's not a shot against a top tier US university. That's about the fact that every university can't do everything well. And so that's part of that re-education that we do with parents is the neighborhood test versus the network test. Just because your friend knows a university doesn't mean it's a great university. So it's gentle education. And sometimes you're going to meet some parents who that doesn't resonate for. And sometimes there are some cultures that doesn't resonate for. As a UK university, there are 130 schools in the UK. In the US, there are 5,000 accredited universities. So, in some smaller nations where there's only 8 or 10, sometimes the name of the university does matter more. So that's where it's important for our reps to be in those different nations, recognizing where those cultural touch points are. There's only a handful of schools in Korea. There's only a handful of schools in other parts of Southeast Asia. And so the name recognition can matter more out in the employment of that student. And so we have to be conscious of that. And that means that we have to be comparing that nation, that home nation of the student, and that university style to what we do in the UK. So it's informing parents of what they might not know or what has changed over the last 20 years, reminding them that the specialty of the major, even if that is, seismic engineering, there's a school in upstate New York, University at Buffalo, which works closely with Stanford University, which is one of the best seismic engineering schools in the world. But everyone knows Stanford. Very few people know University of Buffalo. So it's our job to help them understand that too. This is a great school for what your student is doing. We should get excited about that. And then being able to compare and contrast to their home nation, right? This school is similar to that school at home. This group of schools is similar to this group of schools at home. So it's not so much that we find roadblocks from parents or the helicopter parents. It's that they come at us frenetically because they have a lack of information. They're using only what they have. And so to calm them, we have to give them more.
I agree. And what you mentioned about the neighborhood thing, yesterday during our global session on student
Yeah.
stress, one of our speakers, Alan Sheptin, he mentioned a similar thing. He called it the cocktail party conversations, where parents meet and they exchange information, and it becomes a little bit like peer pressure for them. That kid got into there, my kid got into there. Am I a bad parent if my kid is not in a top school? So similar thing. What Kemal mentioned about the relaxed part, I'm gonna go back to this. And what I experienced as a counselor here in Bulgaria was that I had lots of parents who were like, "Oh, I don't really care about where my kid is going to go. I just want them to be happy, to feel good, whatever they decide, they know best." But then if there is a problem with this kid and you see that this kid is not moving forward, is not doing well, you need the support of this parent, but you can't get it because the parent thinks that their child knows best. So what do you do in these situations? And Kemal, this question is firstly for you.
What would I do with trying to get the parent back into the conversation if they're too
Yeah,
relaxed?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would invite them in. I would, and sometimes if parents may be living in another country temporarily or doing business and can't get back, I'm like, let's meet online. Now we have this wonderful technology where I do want to meet with you. I want to hear I want to hear from you. And it's important, again, it's important for me to hear from you how you're feeling about this situation. Of course, I've got information or perspective or opinion or doubts or whatever from the student that I see every day, but I want to make this happen. So if they can't come in, I'm going to go with an online meeting and kind of try to insist on that. And usually there's valuable information, perspective from the parent. I mean, it may be of course, ideally a parent who is very involved and reads our timelines and deadlines and the sheet, all the information that we have to make this process run smoothly. Those some parents are reading that. The ones that aren't, I will send that to the parent again and say, can we have a follow-up meeting? Again, showing that initiative and sometimes being a little, gently insistent that I need your help with this process.
Thank you, Kemal. And Ilse, what are your tactics to dealing with the too relaxed parents?
It's definitely a challenge, but I would say I call them all the time and we have like a meeting with the three of us. And then it's like Andrew said, like they don't know what they don't know. So I start giving them like data, like acceptance rate. I start talking about percentage of international students that actually get to those universities. I try to talk about specific cases. So I'm like, okay, this alumni, he thought that he would be, like entering super easily, but this is what happened, and this was his curriculum. And now let's compare it a little bit with well, my students' curriculum, and let's see if we have a little bit of everything. So I try to not give them just like an opinion, also give them like data, specific data. Okay. Like if you have SAT with 1,000, it's not going to happen. And this is why, not because I say so, but because the universities are saying so. So I think sometimes with these parents that are too relaxed, I want to give them like data so they can decide based on that. And also let them know, because I think sometimes they believe like, oh, they're 17, they're 18, they're already grown-ups. But I try to talk to them about that, like, no, they're just kids, and we're asking them to decide like a really big thing, and they're still so young. So in my case, I try to let them know, like, okay, would you let them, I don't know, drink at 2 o'clock in the morning, or just go by themselves, and just like put a specific cases. And when they say, no, no, I wouldn't do that, or well, maybe, I'm like, okay, you're asking them then something that is extremely difficult and needs a lot of support, not only from me, but also from you.
Good approach. And Michelle, your turn.
I agree that it's really important to engage the family in the process and to call them in if they're not being proactive. And I also think it's really important to document everything. So always having those emails or those meeting notes available, so you have evidence that you've talked to them and that you've, given them different advice, that the child isn't doing what they need to do, and that you're asking for their support. Because sometimes we never want a family who's seeming like they're leaving it all up to the kid, and then they come back and they kind of blame you, right? So you want to make sure that like you're protecting yourself, I think, in these situations as well. And I think too, like having the student there when you're having these conversations helps a lot, because then it shows like they have to be together. And I think that's really important. So I never have meetings with parents without the students there. I always say that the student has to come, because it's not the parents going to university, it's the students. So then it engages both of them.
Thank you, Michelle. And now I'd like to move on to another very hot topic in the parental counselor parent-student relations, and that's when there is a disagreement. And there is a question here from the attendees, which is pretty much what I was going to ask. So Edgar asks, what would be a good approach to help students who want to study a career that is totally opposite to their parents' ideas? Let's start with Kemal again. How do you deal with the disagreement?
Yeah. With the disagreement, I mean, I'm going to be careful at the beginning of the process. I'm going to listen to the parent. I'm not going to feel like everything is going to get solved in the first meeting that the four of us are having, or three of us, including the student. If that means that the parent is strong personality or has very strong opinions, I'm just not going to engage in a battle of it. I'm gonna listen. I think it's that Stephen Covey approach that I'm gonna listen to seek to understand first, knowing that every day I see the student and I can get more information from the student later on, but this may be a limited time that I have with a parent. I mean, I think the strategy of doing that also builds trust, and it builds the relationship, in that I'm not going to challenge or disagree with their opinions. Their opinions are going to be their opinions, and they may stay the whole time. But then, if the relationship is positive, then the next time I meet, or at the right time, I can bring in concepts like best fit, or looking at the results from their interest and aptitude surveys, begin to, um, you know, even this out a little more and begin to bring in other perspectives that I think they would listen to. I've also had success just recently with one of the reps that visited. Before he visited, it was great, and I leveraged the university representatives that bring in a whole different perspective to reach out to the parents, and I think they really appreciate that. The rep did that with a parent before, then he came here, and now I have two additional students who have that university on their radar, and getting the parent. It's not a situation where the parent is pushing back on or has a different feeling about what they want their child to go into. But again, it's just the relationship and the trust built with, in this case, another advocate uh, for the student, especially in the event that it's different than the parents.
Thank you, Kemal. Ilse, back to you.
Yeah, I think like the first example that we had was, and it's a real one, no? Like when my student wanted to study art, and then the parents were like, no, engineering. And it was that conversation, like, okay, let's see if they have something in common and we can hit middle ground. And in her case, she did, and she studies right now architecture. She's pretty happy with it, but it was just because we tried to find middle ground. Like what do you need? What do you want? And then maybe you can have a master's degree in something related to art or work in that in that terms, But I think I've never had a case in I'm lucky, I think, where it was like, no, we're not gonna do this and it's a no. But I do have like a lot of cases where I have to negotiate and find a middle ground where the kid is okay with it, even not like the happiest, but okay. And the parent is also like, okay, let's do this.
Thank you, Ilse. Michelle, and then I have a question for Andrew.
I agree that I think listening is the first step. I always just let the parents kind of talk and hear their point of views because I think at the end of the day, sometimes maybe it's not that they're in complete disagreement with their child, but they're having a lot of anxiety about letting them grow up and be an adult and go abroad. And sometimes I think as the counselor, if we kind of hear them and understand them, it kind of puts everything at ease. And I also talk a lot to the students individually about, their parents are paying, so you have to come to middle ground because we also know teenagers will sometimes, stick it out and say, no, this is what I want to do, and I'm not doing what they want me to do. And so finding that middle ground. And this year I did have a family that really wanted the student to go to Italy, and he really wanted to go to Canada. And finally, we found a middle ground where he could apply to both places. And now we think he's going to go to France. So that's, they finally got to that middle ground. But it was a lot of me almost communicating to each of them what the others were feeling, because I felt like when they were at home, they were just fighting about it. And so it was nice to listen to both of them and kind of help them through this.
Thank you, Michelle. Andrew, what you said before, I really liked it that with an art degree, you can actually get into so many other careers. And one of my best friends is an art teacher, and she would love you for what you said about the variety of careers you can get into afterwards. But my question would be, how do you explain this information to the parents? Because I'm sure you had cases where students who wanted to come and study art in BIM were, stopped by their parents who wanted them to get into a more traditional and conventional degree. So how do you have this conversation with the parents?
I try to reverse engineer it. I try to find out what their hesitation with the art degree is. If it starts off with, well, nobody makes any money making art, well, we know that that's categorically not true. We also need to unpack what that means. What percentage of people are movie stars in any nation? Okay, 1% of 1%, but so are the billionaires. So if you're expecting your child to also be Steve Jobs, then we have some unrealistic expectations with their computer software degree as well. So we need to figure out, do we have realistic or statistically realistic expectations of your child in any field? Once we sort of come back from that, then we can start talking about, okay, so the fear was money and what making a living looks like. Let's talk about the nation that you're in. Is it government supported arts funding and arts contracts? If you are in most of Western Europe, the answer is yes. Teachers and theater professionals in nations like Germany and France and Norway make roughly the same amount of money because they're state-funded organizations. So the arts are heavily funded in some nations. If you're in the US, Canada, Mexico, and where that isn't true as much, where the governmental funding is lower for the arts industries, then how do we supplement that? What is an arts job even? Because if you are running the box office of a theater company or of a dance company, or if you are running the payroll of that company, that's technically an arts job, but it might be a more traditional career. But you need to understand that art form before you become a CPA to help with the accounting of that company. So again, we're sort of reverse engineering back down to the point where we figure out that, oh, the arts degree is just another step in that direction. If that doesn't work, and often I find that that is the case, we start with sort of, the big fear, and we can sort of whittle it down, that sort of, iceberg approach with the parent. And it really is just an aversion to the arts for whatever reason. Then you have to recognize that that is a personal situation with that parent, and maybe something about themselves that has nothing to do with your university or even their child. And you can sometimes have conversations around that. But traditionally, what I find after that is at a macro level talking about things like employment. I have a friend who runs an employment agency in Boston, and the two of the majors that they place the most are film majors and people who come out with what we would consider performance degrees, whether that's dance or theater or film acting. And the reason that those two majors get placed more than anything is because every Fortune 500 company in the US and every large company across the world is creating digital media for their company. And that requires writers, musicians, cinematographers, directors, filmmakers, performers, script writers, script analysis. And those are skills that you don't learn in your MBA. Those are skills that you don't learn in your marketing degree, skills you don't learn in your accounting degree. And so as every company transitions to not just an online presence, I mean for social media, I mean truly as companies transition to their online presence for their website, for their internal video making, for their presentation and slideshow work, that requires a certain level of expertise now as that bar has been raised. We're all familiar with the phrase death by PowerPoint now. And so we have to find ways to make not only those sort of generic presentations better, but we have to have people presenting them better. And now we have people who are trained to do that. So speaking about the reality of employment agencies and placement agencies and even temp agencies that are using these types of students all over the place. And then those students continue to go on inside of those fields. For a long time, the arts served creative degrees, but now they are also going into public relations and quality assurance and even R&D in places because they can be the user for these products that are being determined. And a lot of times, that data can be helpful in reassuring parents because that's, again, what we're doing. We're really talking about managing fear and managing expectations. There are times where we have parents come across as hard-nosed, and while we try to have as many conversations with the students present as possible, it can be important to have one-on-one conversations with the parents to unpack that fear. It's not our job to help them solve those issues, but it can be our job to help that student and that parent have an honest conversation about why that parent is so adamantly against. On the complete opposite end of that spectrum, where the university compromises, is we have started offering classes that are what we call dual honors degrees in the UK, or what would be considered double majoring in the US, where we combine actual what we call traditional majors, right? We have a songwriting major combined with a music production major, and that music production is practical skills for people who want to be designers and mixers, and that is a more traditional 9 to 5 style job. We have music business and songwriting, film business and film directing, and these are real business degrees taught with real business teachers, just scaled and slightly adjusted to the arts avenue. So that means that you are getting that traditional business degree, but it has the arts flavor in the same way that if you went to any business school, they are going to have that skewed in the direction of the teachers that are doing that. If those teachers are working um, in biomedical engineering, then that business degree is going to be tinted towards biomedical engineering. And so I think it is important to show that we are compromising in both of those areas, in both of those directions. Um, but data is always good for those sort of hard-nosed parents because that's usually what they're concerned about. What is the financial capability of this? And we have some data on that. What is the realistic employment capability? We have data on that because there's lots more engagement and employment in the arts than just being on screen in the cinema. And comparing that also to what they consider real world majors, that movie star is the 1%, the CEO is the 1%, and finding the realistic sort of attainability level inside of there. And then compromising on our and hearing what it is the parents want, hearing what it is the students want to give some more practical skills and bringing in those production, those business, those accounting skills, but just gearing them towards the arts application. We found big success working from sort of both of those ends towards the middle.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, I
Actually,
just
with what you were saying, you answered two questions from the chat that were posted recently, one by Herman and one by Jody, who is asking about who has the crystal ball to the career of the futures. And apparently, Andrew has the crystal ball, or at least some kind of access to it.
yeah,
Kemal has something
yeah,
to add,
yeah,
and then you.
I just want to add. I mean, Andrew, that was wonderful. As I listen to you, I'm kind of, sort of pretending that I'm a parent, listening to, your perspective. You're on the ground. You know students who are attending university. And that's what I was saying earlier is on our side of the desk, having good relationships with university reps that can, just add in most likely the same perspective that we have, but you say it differently. You say it with different context, and it's so valuable. I know another tactic that I use, and it's a little harder for kids to, well, I mean, it's easy to chat with kids at the university, but it's right there, and it kind of takes a little digging and back and forth. But that can also be a valuable tactic that a student can use to ask students, so what's the job market like, and what has your experience been, and share that with their parents as well.
Thank you, Kemal. You raised your hand and wanted to add something.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I thought it was a very important question. And for Yodi, I mean, this is something that my boss shared with me, and I thought it was very useful. It is just like a report on the future of jobs of 2025 from the World Economic Forum. So this is a
Just a second,
300.
You've posted it just to us, to the hosts and panelists. Can you change it and post it to everyone so that the
Sure.
attendees can also see the link?
There you go.
Perfect,
Perfect.
thank you.
So it is just a huge report of 300 pages. Of course, I didn't make my students read it all, but I'm sharing it with the parents. Like, listen, these are the jobs of the future. It's not me saying it. It's someone like a World Economic Forum. So it's pretty big. And the other one for the kids, this is a good tool that I'm using that I also learned from my other counselors. And it is just basically, it's like a game. It's like cards for future jobs. Some of them are super funny, like black hole maintaining director, whatever. And some of them are funny, but I try to check it with them and say, like, is this possible? Do you think it's gonna be possible in 10 years, in 20 years? And it's like a conversation that I have with the kids. Like, does this sound real to you? Like in 20 years, you're gonna be doing this? And some of them are pretty neat. And also they give you the skills that you need to develop. It is not only like, oh, these are the future jobs. It's like, what skills you need to develop. And I think that can be useful regardless of the thing, like, oh yeah, it's gonna be a thing or not. You still have to develop those skills.
Thank you. So Andrew just raised his hand. Andrew, your turn.
Something else that was published, I forget where it came from, but it was published in the US. It was about employment in North America. And they did a survey of working adults ages 18 to retirement age 65. And they were just simply asking people how many people worked in the field of their college university degree. And only about 40% of people in the US, this survey was done in the early teens, early 2000 teens, only about 40% of people worked in the field that they studied at university. And of that 40% of that slice of pie, almost 90% of those people were doctors, lawyers, and CPAs. So what we're finding is people who work in the field that they studied at university tend to be those people who have to pass qualifying exams to then work in that field. The majority, the overwhelming majority of people do not work in their field of study from the university. And this is really surveying the sort of end of the boomer generation in the US, Gen X and and beginning of the millennials. And what we're finding with Gen X and millennials as well is that those people tend to have two, three, now millennials, even four different career paths. And what that means is people working in a field between 5 and 10 years. And so there's lots of people who are graduating, going into their field of study, and that's great. But 10, 15, 20 years later are in a completely different field, but because of connected through lines, they found different entire careers. And so that's also great information that I give parents all the time. I ask them, are you working in the field of your university degree? Oftentimes the answer is no, unless they're a doctor or a lawyer or a CPA. And that allows us often to open up the conversation about saying that this is a portal to the next world. University is an opportunity for your student to study the things that make them excited, and then they go out into the world ready to work, and then they can discover more opportunities when they're in the workforce that are tangentially connected to their first job out of university.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm one of those people. I'm a lawyer by education, LLB and LLM. Never worked a day in the field, and I'm proud of this. I'm proud that I joined the white good souls of education rather than the dark souls of lawyers. Michelle, would you like to add something to the topic of the careers and how they all turn out?
Yes, I've been talking a lot too about students about it's not the career path that you choose that's going to make you successful in life. It's about the choices that you make. And so we talk a lot about of course you need money to live and survive, but just because you go into medicine doesn't mean that you're going to be rich and wealthy and happy and all these things. And I think sometimes looking at those, having those conversations with students is important because a lot of times they will tell me, oh, I want to be a doctor because they make a lot of money, or I want to go into law because they make a lot of money. And so showing them that that's not the only thing that drives success. And also, bringing in people who have had career paths. So last year we did a career talks with our faculty. So our faculty did talks to the students about what they studied at university and what different careers they've had. So then, for example, we have a kindergarten teacher who used to be a veterinarian. And so she talked to them that she decided to go into education because she became a mom and it was a lot of long hours and a lot of work. And so with education, she was able to be at school with her kid. And these are things that teenagers don't think about. And I think that's really important for them to hear. Also our head of school, he used to be in business. And so seeing how you can go into what you study is not exactly what you'll do in the future. And so that was really nice for them to see.
Thank you, Michelle. Unfortunately, we just have 10 minutes left and I still have a few more questions. So I want to go quickly to this topic. We have both seen the parents who are the overachievers and want their students to go to the Ivies and top universities and so on. But you as counselors, have you faced those parents who are actually not aware of the capabilities of their children, those parents who don't know that their children have a huge talent, for instance, or very successful, too successful at school and in certain subjects. And if you had those parents, how do you explain to them actually how good and how smart their children really are? Kemal?
I just want to make sure I'm clear on your question. So for parents with different expectations than their child, or not seeing their children's
Let's say
special
parents
talents,
with lower expectations, parents who don't really realize how much better their children can actually do.
and how do I explain that, or
How
how
do
do
you
I?
approach such situations? Yeah.
Sure, sure. Um, I think again, I'm in a small school here, so I going back to our conversation on career and career development, I have a luxury of having a couple tools that I work with, and I'm able to personalize that with students, and I bring parents into the mix as well. So I do get results on kids' interests and their values and their aptitudes, and I pull all that together, and there is you know, just a wonderful report that parents can read about those talents, or you know, or areas that they're not as strong in. So that gives me a great launching point to talk with parents. And so most of us have some kind of tool in the various platforms that we use for college admissions or sending documents. And I encourage all of us to really try to find a couple tools as a way to launch that conversation with parents.
Thank you, Kemal. Ilse?
I guess in my case, I think it just has happened like once where the parents didn't have faith in the potential of the kid. And what happened was basically I showed them the SAT, basically, because in his case was like 1400s, but in like 10th grade. And I was like, this is not common. So I showed them like the statistics, and then also we encouraged them to, or him in his case, like to get to contests, like international contests. And once he started winning, the parents were like, huh. So like, okay, he's not only because I thought he was smart, but only for the school, like nationally speaking. And I was like, no, this is something more. And he started winning contests internationally. And finally, he was accepted in YU Abu Dhabi with a 50% scholarship. And they didn't want him to apply. Actually, they were like, no, it's like, and I was like, okay, just let him apply, as an exercise. Let's see how it goes. We're not losing anything. And he was accepted with a scholarship. And that's when the parents were like, whoa, okay, so it is something more. And I was like, yeah. So
Congratulations
just
to you too. Michelle, how about you?
I feel that one area that maybe the parents kind of doubt the child in is maybe not so much academics, but in being independent. So last year I had a student who really wanted to go abroad, and her parents kept saying she couldn't. Like they didn't think that she could do it herself. Like she didn't know how to cook, she didn't know how to clean, they just didn't have confidence in her. So one thing, first listening to them, trying to understand if it was more about finance, understanding their point of view. But then me and the school psychologist kind of started to push back a little bit with them and ask them, what they were doing to help her become more independent. So we asked them, like, can she use the busing system in Brazil? And they would be like, no, we're too scared to let her do that. So it was more about them being scared to let her do anything. And so we talked a lot about that, that they have to trust that at 18 years old, she knows what to do, that they've raised her right, like she'll make the best choices. And so it was kind of a process that went almost the whole school year, but we eventually got them to see like she was able to do things, and like she was going to be able to be independent in another country.
Thank you, Michelle. And Andrew, with the art students at BIM, have you had these cases where parents are actually surprised by the talent of their children and surprised by their achievement in the art field?
Yeah, sometimes. And I think that's because sometimes you get students who are highly talented from parents who don't participate in the arts at all. And so the parents don't know, the only art that they know is what their student is performing. And so they're unaware that that student is good, great, exceptional. And it happens rarely because by the time they get to be applying to college, that the parents have at least seen their student go through middle school and high school experiences, just like with athletics. But it can happen that they are surprised. And some of it is just because, like anything, their level of expectation rises with the growth of their child. And so as they see their student get better, they just think that's the talent level of all students from that area, from that nation, from that age group, because it's the only student that they know in that area, that nation, that talent level. And so it's not so much that they don't believe in their student, it's that they are really unaware because they don't have a good metric or measuring stick because they are not themselves an artist. That's usually where we find that. Parents who go, oh, I didn't realize they were actually good. I thought I just loved them a lot and thought that they were good.
Nice. I have one last but not least question actually for all of you. If you could propose one collaborative initiative between schools and universities to improve parent engagement in the application process, what would it be? Kemal, can I start with you?
Sure. Um, I think for my population, it might be gathering the kind of questions that this community, this population has, and maybe developing an FAQ that I can publish for parents, have it available. Use the perspective, the expertise of university representatives and my colleagues, and just again specify it for my population here. So just a fun FAQ publication that I can give to our community here.
Thank you, Kemal. Ilse?
Um, I guess just keep on experimenting. In my case, I do a lot of experimenting, like let's do this and see if that engages the parents and then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And also I think improving the communication within our institution, because sometimes I have great ideas, but I do not share it with all of the teachers or with my principals. And I think it's important that we all understand the importance of the counseling process. So that way, as an institution, we also promote it and we're like in the same line working together.
Thank you, Ilse. Michelle, up to you.
I think for me, in my school community, I think school visits are the best thing because the parents want to see you and want to know that when their child gets to your university, that there is a person there kind of looking out for them. I think the personal connection does a lot more than the virtual connection for my community.
Thank you. And Andrew, what would be your suggestion for a collaboration between schools and universities?
I think universities need to invest in counselor tours, and I think counselors need to invest in those tours. And that means the school is investing in those as well, giving time off, giving the opportunity to go do that. Because, similar to what Ilse is saying, if the parents can speak to somebody who has actually been there, that can often assuage a lot of the fears when we're talking about studying abroad or internationally. So getting boots on the ground in either direction. Universities need to invest in opening campuses to the counselors, and counselors need to aggressively go after those schools and have them visit as well.
Thank you. And I know that Kemal here is one of the counselors who is always looking for universities to visit them. So
Yes,
discuss.
please come.
And one last question before finishing. Actually, it's more of a task for you. I want you to put yourselves in the shoes of a student who is going to apply to university and think about what would be the one sentence you want to tell your parents. Maybe start with Michelle this time.
So one sentence that if I'm the student, what would I say to my parents?
Yes.
I think I would say like, I really want to do this.
Thank you. Ilse?
If I were okay, would probably be just be open to the options.
Thank you. Kemal, your one sentence.
Yeah, I would say thank you for letting me be who I am and for pursuing, my preferences, my dreams, and thank you for being there behind me and supporting me in that journey.
Beautiful words. And Andrew, what would be your sentence to your parents?
I need you to trust my counselor.
Thank you. I think counselors just fell in love with you even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
As we have to wrap up, thank you to our panelists for your wisdom and honesty, thoughtful perspectives. Andrew, thank you for being able to join just in the last moment, not being shy. I think that's what's clear is that family influence is neither a hurdle nor a guarantee. It's just a constant factor that, when managed, can become a powerful asset for all the students. Thank you to everybody. I'm releasing you now to go and continue your meetings. Join us for our next two info session slots as well. We have prepared for you some interesting things. And I'm looking forward to connect with you again and see your faces next year during the 7th conference. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Nia.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.